I'm a liar. I'm one of those guys who makes his living helping movie directors deceive the camera. You know, lying to the lens. Making effects that you see on film that you believe are real. I'm a liar, an illusionist, and a trickster. I've been doing it for more than 50 years. Let me show you something. This effect was shot in the 1970s in Pakistan, in a time when they descended into martial law. We'd spent several weeks in Lahore under curfew, and being a foreign film unit making a politically sensitive movie, we were continually harassed by the secret police. Our location was in Calabar, in between Pakistan and Afghanistan, a lovely set of salt mountains. A very isolated spot in a very conflicted area. Luckily, between shooting, I had several months to train that magnificent horse. Not exactly an effect created out of thin air, but certainly a fantasy. Not a computer-generated image either. CGI hadn't even been dreamed of then. The cameras we used were the old Arri 2C, developed before the Second World War and used in German propaganda. Ours had been modified with high-speed motors so that to slow down the effect that you've just seen. Another film made about the same time in Tito's Yugoslavia was The Iron Cross. I was chief of makeup and had also been asked to do some of the special effects. We had lost our workshop facilities in that terrible earthquake in Udine, and I had to store my effects props in my car. Knowing that there were only props, they were just chucked into the back, like you throw anything in your car. And returning to my car late one night, I found myself surrounded by military police. They took my car keys, they opened the car, pulled out a weapon, a rubber gun. They had the grace to start laughing and actually played with my weapons for some time before clattering away with their own military vehicles. We used the same camera on that film for the combat scenes. Let me tell you why. Don't forget that at that time, it was before the age of Steadicam, and the weight and shape of the Arri influences the type of influences the quality of the picture that you see. These cameras were used during the Second World War for newsreel footage. It is these bumpy images that you accept as real. We discovered that our particular camera had been captured by Yugoslavian partisans from the German combat unit. It had become a spoil of war and was returned to Munich, to Ariflex in Munich, for maintenance, and then back to Yugoslavia. Imagine the surprise of our operator when he read on the bottom plate of the camera, Arnold and Richter, 2C, body number 7. Knowing the history of this camera, and only number 7 out of the thousands made, helped inspire the second unit. Originally used by the military to record their actions, and later by us to capture our version, the camera had endured, remaining a constant witness. So the witness is the camera, and you, the public, are the jury. Besides the link between cameras and special effects, there is sculpture. When I begin a new job, I begin in the simplest way you could possibly imagine. I check the clay bin in my studio. I clear a studio table. And I start to make a new modeling tool out of a stash of wood I've got from South Wales, while I think about what I've got to do. Of course, I must have my lucky scissors too. These I've had these began their life in my father's studio nearly 100 years ago. And I've had them for at least 60. My crew know these scissors. I've often passed them around to be touched for luck before an effect shot. I don't think they've ever let me down. They do cause me a lot of problems sometimes, real panic, especially when I can't find them. That's why they're tied here. Once outside, going to Madrid airport, I was going for a flight in Madrid airport, and I was caught with these in my hand baggage. In desperation, I ran outside, and I buried them in a plant pot. Thank goodness they were still there when I got back. So don't forget, the next time your loved one asks you for a gadget or a special tool, get it for them. The right tool for the job really helps. Me, I'm waiting for some more solar panels so I can stay in my studio, watching the English weather, generating enough electricity to start work. In the same studio, when I was young, using your imagination was a way of life. My father had been an aircraft engineer and was also a fine artist. My mother was a graphic artist. Her talent as a sculptor came to light much later on. People who know film and sculpture sometimes ask me, what inspires you? Inspiration, the way you find it, is a thing that's not normally discussed at a professional level. But as an artist and technician, I'm often expected to pull it out of a hat, like a magician. Luckily, it gets easier as time goes by. And of course, every artist has his own secret loves and passions. Much of my inspiration comes from when I was a young boy. Growing up and watching my parents work, I started my own sculpture. One was a piece of my dog, dog Tessa, a real friend. Another one was a head of a soldier after a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci. I did that when I was about 14. At art school, I was very lucky with my masters too. One of them was an elderly Russian, Sergei Urievich. He was a count, and we called him Princey. His master had been Rodin, whom he'd worked with in Paris when he was young. The other master was a giant of a man, an Italian, Sir Michael Rosello. His principal talent was sculpture, of course, but he loved opera. His work was always beautifully finished, especially when he was doing really large pieces of work. I used to help him make the molds for the bronze foundry, and he always sung arias while we worked. Me, I can't sing, but I love to work to classical music. It was Michael who introduced me to Madame Tussauds, the waxworks in London, where I was apprenticed to the studio manager, Bernard Tussauds, who was the grandson or great-grandson of Madame Tussauds. It was there I learned a different level of realism in sculpture, and a lot more, getting ever closer to the world of cinema, though I didn't know it at the time. It was from Madame Tussauds that I escaped to join Sir Stanley Kubrik on the film 2001, The Space Odyssey. I was to assist Stuart Freeborn in the making of the Planet of the Apes sequence. I see my time with Stuart as a postgraduate course from a master of his craft, researching ways of working with new materials that have come standard in this day and age. It was an exciting time, not only as a sculptor, but supporting a director in a film that's become a classic. Stuart was normally very secretive about his work. It was he who he used to practice his own makeups on his own face. And he was responsible for the design of Yoda in Star Wars. Knowing the man, I can still see him. I see the qualities in the piece of work that he produced. Surely an example of the richness that any artist can give to his work. When we started on the masks of 2001, there was not much information. Nearly 50 years ago, the anthropologists had done some work, but there was still no universally accepted image of early man. All we could do was look at things of Ray Harryhausen's, his King Kong, or go to the zoo and stare through the bars. We still had to give the camera something believable. So what were we dealing with? Fact or fiction? This was a film with a fantastic concept. It was a dream, an open-ended research project with no apparent budget restrictions. It took Stuart and me several months to find out what Stanley wanted, what he would accept, and what would work on camera. So I became a man who made masks. Well, not exactly masks. About the same time, the film The Battle of Britain was in pre-production. One of the art department came to me and asked whether I thought that the materials we were using were strong enough to make model planes. So I built hundreds of Stukas and Spitfires and Heinkels and Hurricanes, and the rest, out of fiberglass and rigid foams. Same technology, different application. We used condoms and gasoline and detonators to blow them up. It was the first time that anybody had filmed radio-controlled planes and with explosives. And the camera loved it, and so did we. A great time. Sometime later, I found my next mentor, Ray Harryhausen, an extraordinary talent. His greatest inspiration was Greek mythology. In ancient Greece, sculptors were considered to be closest to the gods. We were not only near them, we were making them. I used to work directly from Ray's drawings. They were so detailed that it was a real pleasure to work from them. I enjoyed with Ray an extraordinary ambience of friendship, humor. It was a real pleasure to work with. And I'd been working with a German producer making the film Christiane Effe. And he sent me a new script with a fantastic story, full of fantasy. I thought, this I must do. Of course, it was the NeverEnding Story. Another wonderful opportunity. I had complete freedom to interpret the illustrations and the ideas in Michael Ender's book as I saw fit. I began with the drawings and maquettes for the snail. We chose her because she had no talking part. The other creatures we delayed until later. The producer liked the snail, and the style was set of all of the other creatures. The next one was Falkor, or Fuyo, as you may know him. I took the head of my dog, Tessa, as a guide for the head, knowing that I could make him talk and smile, as dogs do. I didn't know what to do about the wings. We really didn't have time to finish them. If I did Falkor again, normally nowadays, wings are made with the help of CGI. If we did Falkor again, the wings would be absolutely fantastic. Not only was I able to bring my dog back to Germany, a dog from my childhood, I also brought one of my parents, my mother, because I knew that we could both work on the same job, side by side. She celebrated her 70th birthday while we were on that shoot. The world of Fantasia was shot in Germany. You may think that most fantastic films are shot in Hollywood or New Zealand, but that's not so. The ancient Greece of Ray's adventures with Jason and Sinbad was in Colmenar Viejo. Yes. The dragon from Conan el Barbaro had its lair in a temporary studio in Fuenlabrada. So your dreams and imaginations can be much closer to home than you might think. Special effects and makeup can be very serious. In the film, The Final Warning, about the Chernobyl disaster, it was essential to be absolutely accurate. Besides, we were shooting in Russia, and we had the same medics who worked on the people so terribly burned. They were advising us that it was impossible to avoid the truth. It seems I'm running out of time. We are constantly reminded that the memory of cinema is very short. The better a film, especially if it contains powerful images, the longer the memory will be. In this business, you're only as good as your last job. They won't be asking me back here again. On a recent project, I had to create a mermaid for my favorite Spanish director, a film about Hans Christian Andersen that inspired his own famous story. Between mythology and legend, there have been many tales of mermaids and monsters. I've made quite a few of them. And look, still no CGI. And why? Because the camera never lies. Thank you for putting up with it.